Hey everyone, this is Socratic Hobbits, a podcast where Kyle Morse and me, Daniel Hayward, try to ask big questions and then answer them. Sometimes we stay on topic. Thanks for listening.
So it sounded fine. It didn't sound like the tin can to you when you listened to the recording?
I would have played it back, and if it does, I'm not sure what to do. I don't particularly want to purchase a new microphone, as we have not made enough money to purchase a new microphone from this endeavor.
I don't think we've made enough money to purchase anything for this endeavor.
But think of the friends we made along the way. Did you think of that?
James, Kyle.
Well, they were already our friends. I think they were.
I told you what Kyle said about his trip across country, right? Listening to our podcast.
No, what did Kyle say?
He said it was a dangerous podcast for him to listen to because he was constantly finding himself stopping and trying to interject into the conversation.
What were we talking about that made him so worked up?
Something that we were I was factually incorrect on.
But what would we have discussed that? Were we talking about doctoring stuff?
It must have been.
That's not where that bone connects. I don't know. Whatever.
The party bone's connected to the drinking bone.
Can you see my fancy new hat? It's on backwards, so you couldn't see the logo, but this is my new company. It's so much fun. I'm having such a good time.
But it's not as good as any. Are we recording?
Yeah. Don't bleep that part out. No, the Davids don't listen to this, so which really surprises me because one of them is working away from home, and I would just think he has all the time to kill. I guess there's other things that he'd prefer to spend his time on. Well, it's I'll just tell you what's so recent, like this week. I mean, this is my first week, so everything's new and shiny. But
enjoy it.
Yeah, absolutely, I am. They like right now. I spent most of yesterday and today just like basically programming, building tools for. And it's not a language per se. I mean, it does have its own language, but it's so simple that if I was to show any programmer, they would kind of just giggle at me. I'm basically just using Power Query and Excel. eTakeoff is the software. I made a pretty sophisticated tool this week, and they was just really valuable to them, and I just got a lot of good feedback.
Nice.
And it was just really exciting. It was really fun to kind of jump and not be sure if I was going to reach a ledge or not.
Yeah.
But to trust them like that we would figure it out. And it just like
clicked.
It just clicked. It was just really great. And the people I work with are super fun too. They've just got a really good sense of humor. Actually, so there's 4 owners, and they like to play pranks on one of them. He's a really good sport about it. And they removed the back of one of his monitors and then soldered in about a quarter size, but it's a Bluetooth speaker, so they can play off of their phones to that Bluetooth speaker. Notification noises, and and he was insistent that it was in the ceiling, and he had popped a couple of acoustical tiles.
This is like just from The Office.
And so what they did, because he was so insistent, was the day after that they put one in the ceiling, actually in the floor underneath, and they were being a little more aggressive with that. Like they were not just playing notification noises, but like the first 3 seconds of a song. And they did that, I don't know, 10 or 15 times, and then pretended like he had found it, and then waited a day. And then they started playing notification noises again. But he thinks he found it. So actually they'll probably start that on Monday. Yeah. There's more fun than just that.
They just love life.
They do. They love life. It's a lot of fun up
What's the range of, I guess, locations that they work out of?
there. They work as far north as in like northern Seattle. They work as far south as um, they've probably done a handful of projects in Eugene or even maybe Medford.
Mm-hmm.
And they're bidding a project in Idaho,
Where in
but
Idaho?
probably Boise. I don't know. But that'd be our we're not a general contractor, not really. I mean, the idea is that we would be eventually. Um,
So what's the project you're working on right now?
I mean, so when you're doing estimates, you tend to go through projects fairly quickly, and we just have a few spec sections that we do. We just do them very in depth. If that makes sense. Um,
For like this week, what was it, schools or?
yeah, it was a school that I was working on most of the
Okay.
time, but I also working on that tool took up a significant amount of time. I also set up all of my like computer equipment. It's a small company. There's like 10 or 15 of us in the office, and then another 15 that are in the field.
Mm,
Um, that'll bump up. We have a couple of big projects starting, so I think there'll be 30 or 40 in the field. Excuse me, in about a month. So yeah, the goal is to kind of level off at I think 40 or 45,
mm-hmm.
bump up in the summers, and then come back down. Yeah. Um, but yeah, I mean, so they don't really do like commercial residential. I'm not quite sure how to phrase that, but like apartment
Yeah, yeah.
complexes. I don't think that they would do that. The more usually larger projects. One of the one of the schools I was working on had a really big steel package, and so, but I'm not. I don't know that we specialize in that. It's kind of its own thing. So, but my boss had headed out for the day on was kind of to that point. Did as much as I could.
Steel's interesting because of how quickly that price is just accelerating. And so what you bid, you can bid with margin today and be underwater tomorrow if you don't have some sort of escalator in your contract.
Yeah, so with both lumber and steel, there's escalation clauses. One way that owners are getting out of that is they are purchasing now instead of when the project
Uh-huh.
is starting.
Right.
But then you have to pay for storage as well. So it's like
It's a cost either way.
it is, but not as significant as it could be.
Right.
So we had some extra material on from some previous projects, and typically a company would just send it back to the lumber yard and get a credit, but they're getting the credit is what they paid for it, and the project started a year ago,
Right.
and that was when the materials were purchased, and so we just said no.
Yeah. I wonder if people are converting like old strip malls and stuff to just construction material storage centers.
Anyway, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. We just had someone over tonight, and he's a marketing student at WSU and had to interview someone for a class on basically career stuff.
Hmm.
And so did the interview, had him over for dinner, talked
Oh, so
about,
he interviewed you.
yeah, talked about the Logan Paul Floyd Mayweather fight because he's pretty fascinated by the way Logan Paul has gone from a student in college to one of the top YouTube social media influencers, content creators in the world, and got to fight one of the best boxers of all time by virtue of doing that.
So can you? What happened? I don't know any of this backstory.
Okay, so do you know who Floyd Mayweather is?
Yeah, I've heard that name. He's a hotshot fighter guy. Did I
Yeah.
get it?
Yeah, so he's 50-0 in his professional career. He's never lost in his professional career. He's known as Money Mayweather because he's very shrewd. I mean, he's retired now. He's 44, but he's always been very shrewd with marketing fights and um, making a lot of money out of them. And there are a couple of brothers, Logan and Jake Paul, who created YouTube channels and got a big following, just sort of like video blogging about them doing stuff in their lives, and
Yeah.
they've both pivoted to boxing. And Logan's more of the amateur boxer. Jake is more angling for the professional boxer.
Okay.
But Logan basically went to Floyd Mayweather and said, "Hey, how would you like to make $30 million? I've done a couple of boxing matches with another YouTube influencer, and so I have some credibility, some minimal credibility as a boxer, and I can bring all my YouTube followers and they'll buy tickets to watch us either in person or via pay-per-view, and you'll be guaranteed, I think he was like guaranteed $10 million and then ended up making 30 million based off the pay-per-view. And then the YouTube guy made 5 million. But it was all set up by the way both of them have marketed themselves as individuals over the years.
So Floyd Mayweather and was it Jake Logan?
It was Logan Paul.
Logan Paul.
Jake
Okay.
Paul's the brother who's doing more professional boxing matches. But
did Floyd Mayweather win?
Well, it was an exhibition, so no one technically won. But if it was judged, then yeah, he would have.
Okay, so has Floyd Mayweather fought any exhibitions where there is no technical winner and lost?
He hasn't lost. He hasn't lost a match since he was an amateur in the Olympics.
That's incredible. I had no idea. I had no idea there was anybody who was that dominating for a sport, for any sport.
Well, I mean, Khabib Nurmagomedov was 29 and with 29 wins, no losses in mixed martial arts.
Is currently?
He just retired this year.
At the ripe old age of 29?
Yep.
Gosh.
He may have been 32. He may have been 30. I don't know.
Hmm.
But basically his dad passed away from COVID and his mom didn't want him to go fight anymore without his dad coaching him.
Huh.
So he said, "Yeah, I'll respect your wishes, Mom."
That's fascinating. Do you know why he would have made that decision? Or
well, he's a very observant Muslim.
Okay.
So there is some religious element to that decision. The other aspect there is he had beaten all the top guys at the time in his weight class, and so he was looking around going, there isn't anyone here who I haven't beaten and beaten handily.
Yeah.
So there's no more challenge here. And my mom, my coach, my dad has passed away. My mom wants me to stay home. I've made all the money I need to live in Dagestan, and yeah. So he's now working as a coach. The other component to it is he has some of his teammates were in the same weight class and coming up, and he didn't want to fight his own teammates. So from his hometown, so he's coaching. I believe it's Islam Makhachev. As he comes up.
Is his name Islam?
Yeah.
Interesting name. Huh. Yeah. Well, I mean, if you've made as much money and beaten the challenge that you want, then it's time to find a different one. And teaching can be very difficult. I mean, I could definitely see that, and maybe his father was the coach and of the whole team, not just him. I don't know. I could see. Yeah, that's just interesting there's just not very many times that you will see somebody at the top bow out.
Right. I mean, Michael Jordan did it basically because the Chicago Bulls management weren't willing to pay for Scottie Pippen and Dennis Rodman to keep playing on the team. And Jordan went, well, I don't want to play on a team that's not going to be any good except for me. So I'm going to retire again. I think Barry Sanders is another one. So he was a running back for the Detroit Lions, and he retired one day. Went, yeah, I'm done. Calvin Johnson, another Detroit Lion wide receiver, more recently did the same thing. And
I wonder if it's more common in sports than it is in other areas.
well, you have to think like MMA, football. Those are sports that leave a lasting impact on you. So if you can walk away financially independent and still have your legs and your brain, you're making a pretty smart move.
Yeah. I was reading about TV shows where they stopped while the ratings were at the highest that they'd ever been.
Uh-huh.
And I believe that there are only 3 shows that have ever done it. I know Seinfeld is one of them, and I think there are 2 others, and I don't recall what they are.
Firefly.
I don't think so. That doesn't sound familiar in that list.
It only lasted 1 season.
Well, then it technically would, but maybe they had some other criteria because there's lots of shows that have only been 1 season.
Yeah. It's just kind of a cult classic in that way because afterwards it got a huge following of people who wanted more seasons. So basically they came back, brought the cast together to make a movie, released the movie, and sort of like tried to tie up a bunch of loose ends in a 2-hour movie that would have been slowly unraveled in the TV series. And so it sort of like sated the appetite of the fans, but it didn't, wasn't all it could have been.
Yeah. I wonder if that was satisfying for people or more of a letdown.
A little bit of both, I think. Speaking for myself.
Yeah, you liked it?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was a space western.
It
was kind of a fun show.
That doesn't seem like, to me, that would be a choice of shows. But I don't actually imagine you watching any TV other than maybe fights because you want to see how they do a thing. Maybe I have some wrong perceptions about you, Kyle.
I enjoy drama.
Yeah, when I think about you, I think, man, Kyle likes drama. How can we have more drama in Kyle's life?
Drama and action.
Drama and action. What's a good TV show? I actually have a hard time imagining you sitting down with your wife and watching some TV about anything other than documentaries, maybe.
TV shows, movie. I'm more likely to watch a movie than a TV show actually, because with a movie it's more self-contained. A TV show, you feel like in order to get it, you need to watch all the seasons, which is a lot more time actually than watching a movie, even though each show is far shorter.
Yeah.
So being able to get the whole story in a 2 or 3 hour time series. So I guess if we're gonna go, you want to do a favorite movies clip here?
Sure. Yeah. Or just one. That's fine too.
Well, I was trying to think of like different examples. I recently rewatched The Godfather, and that's just a masterful movie, from the family dynamics to the action to the drama to the just the acting and the cinematography.
I haven't seen that movie.
Really?
But you would recommend it?
Yes, I would recommend it.
Okay. At the last job that I worked, the owner of the company had in his office, it's probably 3 feet by 6 feet or 5 feet or something, a portrait of the Godfather, and it said, I think it was probably a quote from the movie, but something along the lines of, "Never tell anyone outside the family what you're thinking ever again."
Mm-hmm.
Something like that.
Yep. So that's Al Pacino's character. I
actually have zero idea of what the plot is at this point, like none. So I don't want I don't want any spoilers. I really like to go into movies having no prior knowledge
at all. Okay.
Zero. Other than, I mean, obviously.
So I will say, I really like the first and second movie. The third movie is so it's a trilogy.
You're already setting expectations.
I'm just saying what I liked. The third movie, I've only seen it once, but I feel like I didn't get as much out of it as I got out of the first and second one.
Well, I'll see if we can, perhaps my wife and I will sit down and take a look at those movies.
I'm curious what kind of movies, like if you were to recommend a movie, what would you recommend?
I'm not going to do top one or top two because I don't know, and it's
Well,
easier to
just
think of.
that's why I went with something that watched recently.
Yeah, a movie that I watched recently that I really liked. So my wife and I actually do like TV shows. Um,
You can go with that.
The English Game on Netflix. It's
Okay.
about some of the first football or soccer going,
From amateur to professional.
and it was a fantastically well done movie, or excuse me, TV show. It's only I think 4 or 5 episodes long, so it's not as much of a commitment as like, and they're not doing a second season. It was a specific story that they wanted to tell, and it's
Is
the
it an
cinematography.
HBO?
No, it's
Not HBO.
Masterpiece.
Yeah. Is that the one that does Downton Abbey?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, and Poldark.
BBC
BBC. Yeah.
and Sherlock.
Um, mm-hmm. Yep, all of these. They did just a really good job with that. What was the one? There was a movie about Sherlock's sister, Enola Holmes. Is a very good movie. My wife and I enjoyed that as well. We we'll watch kids movies. I'm not quite sure when we started doing that, but we have we just have a restriction set on our Netflix account,
Uh huh.
and we just
Oh, but
never.
Netflix doesn't have any of the Pixar movies anymore.
No, but we have Disney. We'd have Disney Plus.
Okay.
So we our immediate family. At one point, we were paying for one of them, and we were just sharing.
Uh
And
huh.
then, like, we paid for our Google subscription, music, and then we were borrowing my sister's Disney login, and they were paying for that. And my mom paid for Netflix, and we all just shared among us.
Uh huh.
But but then uh, Google Play Music went away, and they just never changed their passwords, and so we've been just still sharing all of the logins, but except for we're not paying for anything at this point.
That worked out well for you. You chose wisely.
Well, we did it, I mean, probably did it for like 2 years before
Uh
that happened, and it's only been since I don't know how long Google Play Music hasn't been a thing.
yeah, I know my wife and I can't wait until our kids are old enough to watch Pixar movies because there's so many now
Oh
that we
yeah,
haven't
yeah.
seen.
So we watched and like laughed out loud a lot at the Millers versus the World versus the End of the World or something like that. I think it was on Netflix.
That's
And it's about
DreamWorks,
this.
right?
Yeah, I think so. I don't know. It's an animated kids movie. Well, we recommended it to Kyle and his family,
Mm-hmm.
and the first, how? Okay, so you kind of know the beats of a movie or a story in general. You have the scene, and then you have complication, rising action, resolution.
Mm-hmm.
Well, his kids only enjoyed the scene setting, because the rest of the time, the Millers were, and this is all in the trailer, but were trying to deal with the things that had caused the end of the world, except it was, there was things that they could do. The end of the world hadn't quite happened.
Uh
Um. Anyway, and so they like screamed and ran away and like hid under the couch,
huh.
and I guess it just wasn't a good recommendation from my wife and I to them. But Kyle and his wife really liked it, so, or at least
So it's more of an adult movie,
no, probably just kids that are a little bit older
right?
than his kids. I guess like when they're old enough that they can understand that a robot that's making people do things they don't want to do is like, it's okay if it's in a movie. It doesn't make you
Oh,
run and scream, like just because
it's
you
not
see
going to come
something.
out of the screen,
Yeah, I don't know how old. I don't know when kids realize that. To a point, I guess, because there's stuff that I don't like to watch,
right?
even though I know it's not going to come out of the screen. Like,
Still makes you feel uncomfortable.
yeah, yeah,
But then there are people who like to be made to feel uncomfortable.
yeah. It's always kind of interesting. But do you ever like to be scared?
Not particularly.
So, do you ever watch horror films?
No.
I know there are some people that like that, and
Yeah.
it never really makes sense to me.
Well, that's what I was thinking of. Is like there are people who like to watch horror films. Like I've watched suspense films, like
Mm-hmm.
oh the Will Smith zombie film, I
I
Am
Am Legend.
Legend, and The Shining,
Mm-hmm.
and I enjoy those.
Yeah.
But I guess they seem more rational than just emotional, maybe.
Mm. Something interesting about I Am Legend is there's a book that the movie is very loosely based off of.
Uh huh.
And, when you watch a good movie, you realize it's based off of a book. You're like, oh, well, I'll probably enjoy the book even
Right.
more because it's,
Exactly.
they're usually better.
Right.
Not so.
Really.
Yeah, it's terrible.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it's just not good. It's kind of like if you have a movie that's about uh, Frankenstein and his monster, and you're expecting like a super action packed story if you read the original, but it's an epistolary book. And I
Oh,
don't
so maybe if you hadn't watched the movie and just had it totally be disconnected from the movie, would it be interesting?
No.
It's just way too slow, or is
Oh
it
no, no,
just
no.
poorly
The
written?
content it's the story structure is very different than what I was used to. The content, like their main focus was how so when you have like Dr. Jekyll, Mr.
Mm-hmm.
Hyde,
Yeah.
you've got, there's a lot of parallels between, indwelling sin
Uh
and
huh.
the author was dealing with, I think, his difficulty with lust
Okay.
in the I Am Legend, and that was a main focus of it, and it was just very it's very peculiar the way that he processed. It just wasn't particularly enjoyable. And
But if you're interested in the psychology of someone who's processing a sin that is impacting their life, would it be an interesting book?
if you don't mind me giving away more, I guess what there's
I guess I'm asking you. Did you finish the book?
I did finish the book. It's pretty short, but one thing that makes a story good
Mm-hmm.
is when the main character feels like they have a lot of initiative. Not necessarily that the things that they do work, but that they're trying. Maybe at first it's somewhat, they feel like they're being forced into a different action by circumstances, but then at a certain point, they say, you know what, I'm going to deal with this.
They have agency.
Agency. Yeah, that's probably the word I was looking for.
Okay. Yeah.
So this main character has, from what I recall, very little agency.
So is someone else the real main character, or something else the real main character?
If anything, I mean, it's man versus nature, but the man, like, you don't really want him to win.
Right.
I don't know if there's another main character.
Like, is the nature the character we're supposed to be examining in that story? Maybe.
Potentially, but I don't like you making me rethink my predisposition towards
Well, I'm
dislike of
not
this
saying
book.
that you should like. I'm not saying that you should like the book. I'm asking if the book was written to a different audience than you are.
That's definitely possible. I don't know if you could hear my cat whining in the background, but I'm going to put her in a different spot. Will you hold on just a
Go ahead and put her down. While Daniel deals with his cat and puts her down, we will return to our story after the 10-cent solution.
I clapped at her. She doesn't like that.
Didn't like it.
No, she never likes it when I do it.
Back when she was alive.
Actually, one of our cats this week stopped eating. We had to take her to the vet to figure out what was going on.
Yep.
Actually, something I was thinking about is, are you ever do you do getting animals? Does that just seem like ridiculous to you?
Not if they're useful.
So, what would define an animal that's useful?
Pigs, chickens, sheep, goats, cattle, a pointing or setting dog or herding dog.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a lot of mice around, cats,
Mm-hmm. So, if
cows.
an animal is comforting, that's not a use that is useful,
I mean, they can have that as a side feature.
but that's not a reason to get an animal
Correct.
unless you've got some kind of medical level anxiety.
Well, again, we're talking about like with the book I Am Legend, we're talking about the audience here,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm not someone with a medical grade level of anxiety that would be fixed by
And I'm asking if that's the only scenario that you would see, like,
oh yeah, like if one of our kids had some issue, psychological issue that the doctor this recommended a pet for, then yeah.
mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. We have a lot of mice. Now we don't. So
Nice. Well, not nice, but
just kidding. No, they're we got one, and then we need to get her a friend, and now we have two, and we're never getting any more.
I'm sure that's what they all say.
No, I don't think that we'll ever get three. Not at the same time.
No, I mean not at the same time.
No, I just mean we'll never have more than two cats.
Oh, I see. Unless you
Yeah.
forget to spay one.
I mean, we have friends who would take them, at the very least. Getting rid of cats is
That's true. As Daniel just demonstrated.
Yeah.
It's a good thing your wife doesn't listen to this podcast.
That's true. It's true. It's good that she doesn't. She know that I put down one of our cats.
But speaking of the podcast, and I think my wife would appreciate it if we talked about something a little bit substantial.
What hasn't been substantial, Kyle? We've been talking for 40 minutes, and so far we've talked about how you doing, how's your job, talked about movies, talked about useful animals. What more could you want in a podcast? Oh, we talked about sports.
Yeah, you were trying to figure out who Logan Paul was.
Yeah, who? Paul, Jack London? I don't know.
No, man, speaking of sports, Jack London. Do you know Jack London coined the phrase "Great White Hope"?
I don't know what that phrase means, so no, I didn't know that Jack London did that.
Okay, so it was when Jack
Was it
Johnson.
White Fang?
No, he was a newspaper reporter writing on a boxing match between a white man and a black man, and the black man had beaten a number of white opponents, and Jack London wrote about the next guy about to face him that this guy was the Great White Hope, essentially to take the crown of heavyweight boxer of the world away from the black man.
Did he win?
No, he lost.
That seems fine.
So the Great White Hope failed.
The Great White Hope it's a very racist term. I've never heard of this. Is it?
Yes, it is.
Huh. That seems bad. I'm not surprised that, a lot of people were racist then, and I think there's still quite a few. I think it's a heart condition. It's one that I would hope would not be as common as it is, but it's like it's just hate for other. It's just a kind of tribalism that's, I don't know. Yeah.
I read an interesting article recently that was pointing out how tribalism is a sort of defense tactic for the current climate of how are they describing the climate? Basically a situation where people jump down the throat of anyone who doesn't conform to the general ideal of what morality is.
Yeah.
Tribalism is a way of inoculating or protecting yourself against that sort of culture. So
I think it's also just a way to protect yourself from having to. Over the last year, I've revisited a lot of my thoughts about just my preconceived notions about many things.
I think a lot of people have.
It's really difficult. It's painful at times. And of course we would protect ourselves from pain. So why wouldn't I, if I feel like I have the majority, or I know that I have a tribe that I can go back to and say, this guy's an idiot, and get validation from these people, why wouldn't I treat, other people who disagree with me in a way that, makes it really clear to me that they are a them and I am an us, and it's us versus them.
Yeah, and I think this article was more pointing out that in our current climate, it's becoming more and more the driving force to do that and form that echo chamber is it's becoming a positive feedback loop in a negative way.
Mm-hmm. So journaling?
Yeah. So, I mean, that's another form of feedback, right?
Oh, look at you. Talk about segues.
Well, I mean, so I listened to that episode where Tim Ferriss interviewed Matthew McConaughey, and he talks about his realization that a lot of times people journal to try and give themselves feedback on or on what's been going wrong with their life.
Mm-hmm.
And he thought to himself, well, if I'm giving myself feedback on negative stuff in my life, why couldn't I use that for positive stuff in my life? And instead of like trying to just use journaling to dig myself out of a hole, why don't I use journaling to build a foundation and structure with things that are going well in my life? And and that was my big, I guess my main takeaway from that is that you're writing down things that are significant to you so that you can look for patterns or themes of significance in your life, whether those be things that drive you forward or pull you down, and try and reduce the things that pull you down and enhance the things that drive you forward.
Hmm.
So there's the
Yeah.
practice of writing down the things that are significant and noting your feeling around them. And then
Mm-hmm.
there's the practice of assessing that, looking for patterns. And then there's the practice of implementing habits and routines based off of your assessment of those patterns.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a pretty good broad line summary of kind of his thought process. I think he had been journaling for years before he had that kind of realization, or
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure, before he decided to think that way about it.
I think you're right from what I
Yeah.
remember.
One kind of other or a different way to phrase the same thing that was is just how I articulate it was a little bit different is a lot of times when people journal, they're trying to get the suck out. They've realized that something sucks, and so they try to solve that problem, whatever that
Mm-hmm.
may be. And instead of just trying to get something out, you can, if you go back through your journals and you've journaled when things are great, then you can figure out what were you doing, what were you thinking, what were your habits.
What were you eating was one of the things he mentioned.
Sure, yeah, what are you eating that like makes you happy? And then when things are bad, instead of only focusing like, okay, how have I solved this problem in the past, you can also say like, okay, what was I doing differently when things were
Mm-hmm.
going well? Are there any of those things that I can do now? Um, and so I think that both forms of journaling are they're fine, whichever one you want. Um,
When you say both forms, I've only heard us talk about one form so far.
so one form would be to journal all the time
Uh-huh.
and use both the positive and negative,
Uh-huh.
add things that are good and take things out that are bad, and solve those problems. Or the other option is only to journal when things are difficult and you can't quite figure it out. Kind of depends on where you want to put your energy, right? So either you do A and B, or you just do B. Does that make sense? Do we try again?
So just thinking through some of the stuff we've gone through together on habits and habit formation, would it wouldn't I guess I'm thinking it'd be more advantageous to have a habit of consistently journaling, so you aren't having to start something up when you're down in the dumps. And maybe it's a thing of like, when you are struggling, you're going to, or I'm going to look for any avenue to any shovel to dig myself out. But
Mm-hmm.
I think it's just as easy that I could be down in the dumps and not have any energy to use a shovel if I don't already
Mm,
have the habit formed to be journaling.
sure. And that very well may be true, but I it's been my experience that people who are in pain, significant pain, will find the energy
Okay.
generally, especially if they have a community that is encouraging them to do that. Says, no, really, the shovel is a good way to dig, to move some of this
Uh-huh.
dirt. Even if they don't feel like it,
How do
pain is
people
a very,
find, is it the pain that does pain generally motivate people to find community, or does it require a certain level of kind of, I guess, a certain sort of foundation that someone has to already have in order to even be in a community that would point them to the shovel?
It's been my experience that a person has to realize that they cannot solve their problem by themselves. Once a person realizes that, then they will allow themselves to be told what to do by people further along the same path that they're on,
Mm-hmm.
and thereby have community.
So of the guys that you've known in the men's group
Mm-hmm.
that you were a part of, how many, or and were a leader in, how many of them came there out of no community versus came there because they already had some community that was telling them you should go here?
Well, that's an interesting question. Most of the time, somebody encouraged them to go.
Okay. And it was someone they trusted, I'm assuming.
Yeah. Yep. There, I would say of the probably 150, maybe 200 that I've seen come through,
Uh-huh.
maybe 150.
That's still a good statistical sample.
Yeah. There are probably 10, maybe less, that did what I just described. And so that makes me think perhaps I'm wrong. You need some kind of base community that says, hey, this is something, whatever you're doing is not working for you.
You at least need like a spouse who says, hey,
So whatever you're doing isn't working.
yeah.
Yeah, but it also could be that, you find that problem and then you ask the people who are already in your community. Nobody's an island, no matter how separate they are.
Mm-hmm.
You have at least, usually you have at least people who you work with.
Right.
And I think most people have, at the very least, they have family. They have most of the time, or, extracurricular activities, something that would bring them into contact with people. A lot of people that come to that group, though, it's a church group, and it's pretty ecumenical, but it's still a church group. So
They have some sort of community through church.
mm-hmm. Yeah, most of the guys in the men group.
I guess that's something I've been wondering about as, I mean, over the past year, people went online a lot more. I know our pastor quoted a statistic from one of the from some of the local pastors he was talking to, who said, we think, I can't remember if it was, we think we've lost 30% of our congregation permanently, or we think we're only getting 30% of our congregation back permanently. And so as there's that
Those
further,
numbers are quite different.
yeah, no, they are. I mean, either way, they're huge and tragic. But as there's that increased unraveling of different social fabrics that have kind of knit society together, and I'm also thinking of people like kids at the school that Belliconi teaches at, where they come from, in many cases, very dysfunctional families who won't even encourage their kid to hop online for a Zoom class. I think he said only a similar 1 in 3 of his kids, 1 in 4 of his kids,
It was less than that.
yeah, were consistently online for school. So when you have that level of disconnect and just dysfunction in the community, it seems to be getting worse. How are people going to get feedback that will move them to a place where they can be helped?
Yeah, I guess I really do think that as things open back up, I think people miss community. I don't think that anybody is loves being apart, and there will be some people who find it very convenient to do as much as they've been doing online to continue to do online.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the majority of people will choose to, not. They'll choose to be back in community. And for some people, that community will be church. For some people, that community will be, other things. I think that it's much easier to drop your kids off at school when school's open. And, even though they don't, they're not going to babysit their kids during the day because either they can't or they don't see the value in it, getting your kids to school, especially when, in some of those poorer communities, that your kid will get fed and watched and be safe for the day. Then they'll do that. I think a lot of things really will go back to, not exactly the way that they were, but more similar.
I like your optimism.
Thank you, Kyle. I'll be here. I'm this optimistic all the time, for the most part. You think that society has permanently changed for the worse?
I don't think it's permanently changed for the worse. I think it's been accelerated in a direction it was already going.
Yeah, and I just see everything in waves. There's gonna be a correction of some kind. New York has already said, has basically banned all online schooling for next year.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that was New York City or New York State, or I don't recall. But I think that's a positive thing. I think that letting kids have snow days and not making teachers teach online is good as well. They're very different skill sets. And as far as feedback, though, for journaling,
yeah,
a lot of that you're doing yourself. You don't. I think in general, 95+% of the time, a journal should be a private thing and not something you show to anybody else.
Mm-hmm.
With maybe a few exceptions. So we've talked about two uses of a journal, or kind of two methods. Another is to process a kind of specific trauma. The exercise is pretty simple. It's for 3 days in a row, you write for 10 minutes about a single event that you're having difficulty with. And it's very difficult, probably not impossible, but very difficult to write about nothing for 10 minutes straight. And then when I say write for 10 minutes, I mean pen to the paper, scribbling for 10 minutes. And one of the reasons that specific events will have a really negative impact on you now, even if they happened 10 years ago or more, or whatever, is that, when you have a positive event or something that you can share, even if it's negative, let's say somebody cuts you off in traffic, or
stuff you can commiserate about.
When you think of that, it's easy for your brain to be like, oh, yep, we dealt with that. No new information. Don't need to think about that anymore. But there's kind of this, I don't know if it's the same as cognitive dissonance, where you have a value but aren't living it out. But if something really embarrassing happens to you, so embarrassing that you don't even want to share it with anybody, whenever your brain thinks about that, it's kind of like, don't think about the pink elephant. And you have all this mental energy on can't think about that thing. And when you spend that time processing it, you can get your brain you can come to a place where it's like, yep, I dealt with that and I don't need to continue to process because I've already done the work. It's painful. It's not very fun. I've done it for a handful of different events and I found it really therapeutic. So that's kind of another one. A fourth way to journal, which I have, I'll say what it is, and then I haven't done it yet, but I'm changing my plan so that I do. And I'll explain that as well. So it's called form journaling. And basically what it is you decide on a set of questions to ask yourself to kind of give yourself a prompt and get yourself focused. And then as your answers change, you can kind of, by answering the same questions over and over again, then you can, I don't know, it's just a way to take some of the
friction of starting out of it. Yeah, I've seen. I think one of the most popular versions of that is the gratitude journal, which there are all sorts of variants on that you can purchase on Amazon or wherever.
Sure. Yeah, that's a good one. So what are 5 or 3 or 2 things that you're thankful for?
Right.
Each day, and then you write that out, and then you can kind of fill up your bliss bucket. I don't know, whatever they say. But so some of my questions is there anything you feel you don't? And these are weekly questions. Anything you feel you don't have control over? What are you thankful for? What were you afraid? Was there anything you were afraid of this week? And one more. Oh, what did you learn? So anything you've taken for granted, anything you're afraid of, thankful, what did you learn? And I'm not, I haven't, because I haven't practiced this, even though I've had intentions of practicing it, I'm not sure if I'm going to stick with those questions, but those are my questions for now.
Those are interesting because the first two questions are kind of two sides of the same coin, taking for granted and thankfulness.
Mm-hmm.
But then the next two questions are sort of, there's less of a connection between them. At least in my mind, what am I afraid of is kind of its own thing. And then what did I learn is kind of its own thing.
Yeah, and you could, if you wanted to link afraid and learned, you could say, what am I shying away from and what am I pressing into?
Oh, okay. Yeah. Trying to get away from, what am I trying to move towards?
Mm-hmm.
Or what am I moving towards?
Mm-hmm. Or what did I, what,
Yeah.
yeah.
What am I fleeing? What am I going towards?
So right now, I haven't had a prompt. And so I've talked about habits quite a bit, but there's no, one of the first places to go to, and I realized that I didn't do this today,
Mm-hmm.
is do I have a prompt for this? And so the way that I would go about creating a prompt for this, there's a couple different kinds of prompts. One is you could have kind of an external prompt, like your phone could remind you on a weekly basis, but your phone is really easy to ignore because we get a lot of notifications. And I try to practice not doing that, to not look at my phone all the time.
Right.
So sometimes I'm better, sometimes I'm not. But, but finding something that I do once a week, perhaps something related to church would be helpful. Something that I do, on a Saturday or a Sunday or any day of the week that I only do once a week would
Right.
be kind of a helpful practice. Something that it's like, oh, this happens every week no matter what. And then you have an implementation intention. When I get home from church on Sunday, I will take my journal out and write these questions down and answer them. And then when that prompt happens, it's really easy for your brain to say, wasn't there something about this?
Right.
And for the first probably couple of times, you may have to, you know, look at that implementation intention. I keep saying those words wrong in order to kind of cement it.
Mm-hmm.
But after you've done it a handful of times, it's like, oh, okay, every time I go to church, I do this.
Right. Yeah, you have a constant trigger.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, you're triggering. So if you want to do something every morning after I'm done brushing my teeth, after I'm done making coffee, after I feed well, that used to be the cat.
So if you're feeding the, yeah. The other kind of journal that I've read about, and this is from Farnham Street, is the decision journal, where you're trying to come up with a decision, and this is really more of a long-term thing where you're tracking your decision-making process, and you kind of write down what the scenario is, what you think the best outcome is, what you think the potential worst outcome is, what you think will happen, and kind of assign probabilities to those things. And then you do this on various decisions as you go through life and assess. It gives you a scorecard for how someone's doing, how I'm doing making decisions. Another rubric that so that has kind of a rubric to it, kind of like the prompt journal. A rubric that I came across as I was researching information on how to journal, was the 3W rubric.
Hmm.
What next? Where you, me, anyone else writes in their journal. I write what happened. I write why that matters, what it made me feel like, what resulted from it, and then I write what I think the next steps are
Hmm.
moving forward, moving forward from that, or moving away from something there. Um,
So So it's actually four W's. What happened? Why it matters? What do I feel? And what are the next steps?
no,
Or the,
what, so what next? So in so what, you kind of have a couple. potential W's.
Is the why it matters and how it made me feel kind of the same thing as well?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So it's like
you could rebrand it as the four.
asterisk.
You could rebrand it as the 4 W's and say what happened, why it matters, how did it make me feel, and I guess, or what it made me feel, and what next.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So something else related to journaling, and I found it very important. I've gone through somebody who had been encouraging me to journal for a long time before I started consistently. He always recommended.
This is a bad pen.
The podcasters can't see that I was waving a pen at you, Kyle. You've ruined my story. Anyway, no. So he would always recommend getting fancy pens.
Yeah.
Ones that have a metal casing or I want to call it a cartridge, but it's and so it's like heavy, it's weighted, it looks nice. Something you sign a big fat check with. Back when we used to sign checks on a regular basis. Anyway, I've gone through I've probably purchased maybe 5 pretty nice pens, and I stuck with all of them for about 2 weeks, and then went back to what I have here, which is a Uniball Vision Elite. And it writes more nicely, especially as a lefty. It doesn't ball pens, as you continue to write, because you're pushing and you're meant to be pulling the ink out. These are just really nice to write with. They last until they don't, and then there's no ink left, and that's fine, and you throw them out and then get a new one. It's like $10 or $15 for 12 of them. You can get them on Amazon. And then for me, I really like the Lecaterm. I think it's 1919, something like that. I'll link to it, but it's a specific.
Make sure it's an affiliate link.
No, I don't know. I'm not going to do that, Kyle. No more affiliate links for us. It's not how we're not going to, what are they going to do? Give us like 15 cents?
We should make a Square Cash account for Socratic Hobbits so that people can donate to the show.
So when you say we should do this, Kyle, what do you mean specifically?
I guess, it's been so long since I made a Square Cash account.
Oh, do you need me to?
Do you want me to do this?
If only there was a website. If there was only a website that we could ask questions and figure out how to do stuff.
Do you want me to do this?
Sure. I don't know who would give to us.
Okay. I'll just put a Square Cash account out there, and
I think we only have like 10 or 20 listeners.
And just say,
James, will you give money to us?
If you like the show, send some money to $ Socratic Hobbits.
Don't send any money to us. I don't know. You can send us money. I don't know what we'll do with it. Split it 50-50.
Buy Daniel a new microphone.
I don't think we're going to get that much money. If we get $100 though, I could buy a new microphone. Actually, the Yeti came out with they came out with a new one. It's only $60.
Really?
Yeah. I might do that. It's my birthday this month. Maybe I'll get somebody to.
What charity would you want to? Are there any charities that come to mind that you'd want to give money to?
I really like the Innocence Project. Yeah. So
I'm actually not familiar with the Innocence Project.
Yeah. So I think that it's related to mass incarceration and specifically the death penalty.
Okay.
So they focus on people on death row and getting them off for especially wrongfully convicted.
That sounds good.
It is. It's great. And I think that there are a lot of problems with our justice system. And while you can get worked up about all of the various other forms of racism, I think that is the most bang for your buck. If that makes sense. So reforming the criminal justice system, I think, would be the way to best use of time, energy, and money. And I know a lot of people would disagree, but that's where I've come to with a lot of the reading and other things that I've done.
Cool.
So Tim Keller's Gospel in Life is also another one that I've been intending to start giving to. I'd be okay with either of those. Yeah. Well, we've been talking for like an hour and 15 minutes.
Do you have anything?
16 minutes.
Anything else on journaling?
Anything else on journaling?
So we talked about you went through 4 different types of journaling. I added decision journaling and
Mm-hmm.
the rubric, the 3W rubric, what next. You brought up using a good pen, and then mentioned that the Univision Elite,
Uniball Vision Elite.
Uniball Vision Elite. Do you have a particular color you like to write in?
Yeah, I do. I write in black. Do you write in blue?
I write in whatever cheap Bic pen I have available to me.
You plebeian. You had a friend?
I had a friend who really liked writing in green ink.
Yeah. No, I in college we had a teacher recommend that we write all of our stories longhand in Sharpie pen. I did that for a long time too. But
Was he trying to get you high, or?
no, she wasn't.
I just hate the smell of Sharpie.
Yeah, I didn't. I thought it was fine, but the only thing I didn't like was that it bled into the next page.
So maybe she was trying to get everyone to write lightly.
No, I think it was because they were cheap and they weren't. You know, it was you had the same non-issue with righty or lefty or issues with ink that you do with. They write really nicely. I
Okay.
mean, they really do. And then, but once you were done, you were done. And you could just throw them out. You never had any. Ball pens have more of an issue with, at least in my experience with ink flow.
Right.
And even certain gel pens, which these are a type of gel pen. But
I like the gel pens that you have the little clicker.
yeah. Well, yeah, that's all I had for journaling. It wasn't that long. This is going to end up being a pretty short episode since we were mostly fluff at the beginning. Actually, I guess one thing else for journaling is you want to try journaling for the next 2 weeks, see how we do, and report back. Do some Socratic Hobbits homework.
I've done 2 weeks so far, so I could do another 2 weeks.
What kind of journaling did you do?
At night, right before I went to bed, I would journal what happened in my day and what I thought about it, and what I thought I might do the next day.
What do you notice for difference prior and after? Any benefit? Any hindrance? Is it just a pain?
No, it wasn't a pain, because it was just, basically sit down in bed, write 2/3 to a page worth of stuff in really fast scribbly cursive. And yeah. What was that?
I just laughed.
Oh,
that was how I laugh.
And it was kind of fun to just sort of focus on what I was thinking about in the day. I think it did help. I want to say it helped stop my mind from racing and thinking about different things, but sometimes I think it just jump-started it.
Yeah.
But sometimes I think it did kind of close the book on things I was thinking about.
Yeah, so I have done a little bit of journaling this week. I read this book called, not this weekend, last week, called Skip the Line.
Okay.
And one of the exercises that he recommends is coming up with 10 ideas about anything, how to improve something. Or, really anything that you can think of, and then write out 10 ideas for that. It's a way to increase creativity. And I did that for about 5 days before going to bed. And the problem is that when you do something creative right before bed,
right,
you end up thinking of a lot. Yep. So I gotta figure out a different time. Probably in the morning do that. But it was fun. It's very interesting.
Yeah.
Came up with 10 ways to improve my old company, 10 ways to improve the Hayward household, 10 ways to 10 businesses I could start, 10 blog posts I could do for the Socratic Hobbits log.
That sounds like actually something that would get me out of bed in the morning.
Yeah. Well, maybe we could try that.
Yeah. That sounds like a lot of fun.
You want to do that for creativity? We could talk about that book a little bit. There's a lot of little nuggets.
Do you want to do that for the next 2 weeks?
Sure. 10 and you want to try, you can decide when you want to. I'm going to try to do mine in the morning.
Yeah, I think the morning it'd be perfect. So
well, Kyle, I'm going to go hang out with my wife.
All right. Well, thanks for walking through journaling with me and
yeah,
and through catching up on all the fluff.
Yeah, maybe we'll just make a note for your wife to skip to minute 45 and see how that goes.
Or put the journaling section at the beginning and then put the film at the end.
No, I'm not going to do that. And if you like the podcast, feel free to give money to Kyle directly. We'll talk to you next time.
All right.
Thanks,
Bye.
Kyle.
Daniel again. Just wanted to say thanks for listening. If you have any feedback, feel free to shoot us a line, either via email at socratichobbits@gmail.com or via skywriting near 39 degrees north and 77 degrees west.